So I'm going to be talking about the web data blind spot. So when I say this term web data blind spot, a lot of you may be thinking, well, web data is obviously instantly accessible already, right? What blind spot is there really for me to talk about? So I'm going to, this is the most useless slide in the deck. I'm going to illustrate this point by playing a game with y'all. So can anyone in here ask a trivia question that anyone else in the room cannot answer? So you're probably thinking of some things you probably could, but you're a little too shy to raise your hand. But what if I now allowed smartphones in the game, right? Now you're thinking, okay, that question that I had in my mind, maybe not so unanswerable now, right? So I think this is a really powerful concept. The idea that the web is basically an extension of our own mind now. So thanks to consumer search applications, we basically know everything that we'd want to know as a person. There's just a little bit of lag introduced in the equation, which I perfectly am happy to live with. Now, the strange thing is that if I were to ask similar questions to your business, I would argue that your business does not have the same capability. So businesses are actually quite disconnected from the web because they have different kinds of questions that they want to ask. So if we play the same game again, and I even gave you more time, let's say an hour, could your business ask questions like, or could it answer questions like, which states are underserved by hotels? Or what pricing strategies do luxury shoe brands use? Or where is crowdsourcing rentals most successful? So these are all questions that have data out there on the web, right? So if we go back to the first question, which states are underserved by hotels? So we can look at things like locations of hotels, that data is on the web. We can look at reviews of hotels, that data is on the web. The problem is that that data is scattered across dozens or hundreds of websites, and maybe thousands of websites you consider niche properties. And all of that data is, in a sense, formatted in a different format across each of these properties, right? So obviously the HTML on one website is different from the HTML on the other website. If we start thinking of each website as its own data store, these data stores now have completely different formats. They're not interoperable and things like that. So that creates a huge problem. But obviously, someone in the hospitality industry would love to answer this question because this is a market opportunity that is hidden in the data somewhere, right? Same thing here. Product data is even worse. There's potentially hundreds of thousands of websites where this information exists. We all go to those websites every day, but it's really difficult for a business to access all information at once. They don't want to know the price of one shoe. They want to know the price of every shoe, right? And they want to segment that by their competitors. They want to see how that price changes over time, things like that. And of course, this is an interesting question that's starting to pop up now as well. So what we've done at Datafiniti is actually make all that, we've sort of forced that data to be interoperable by basically going over the entire web and pulling all that content into a single format that's standardized across every source and then making that data searchable. So in a sense, kind of like a B2B version of Google. So what I'm going to do is walk through some examples of data that does answer these questions, and I'm going to show you a couple visualizations that we've done with some folks and some other folks that kind of highlight what answers can be pulled out of that data. So I put links in here, but Bitly doesn't like making REST API calls for some reason. So I'm going to copy this guy in. So this is the JSON view thing. Okay, great, of course. So JSON view is not on this thing. I was hoping it was. That's okay. So this is really hard to read, of course, now. But what this is basically, I put in a query, you can kind of see it up here. I'm querying our API. It says, give me a bunch of reviews in JSON format that have the category hotel in the US, and they have reviews and they've been updated like in the last month or so. And so you can see a bunch of reviews in here if you look closely. A little hard to see though. But the idea here is that this data has been, like I said, sourced from multiple websites, and now it's in one single feed. So then I can now actually start working with that data. So let me go back here and click on this guy. So we did analysis of about 400,000 hotel reviews across 50 states. Found some surprising stuff. So we created like a little D3 visualization around this. Happy to report that Texas, where we live, is doing pretty well. Surprisingly, Washington, D.C. has terrible hotel reviews, like 2.7. That's like atrocious, right? Like below 3 is really bad. Hawaii does really well. Oklahoma and Idaho do really well. That's weird. Sorry if anyone's from those states. Just not what I was expecting. And then we also sort of correlated this with sort of other sources of public data, so like population data. You can see states like Nevada have are huge outliers because that's obviously a destination state, right? And then other states do quite poorly for the number of reviews they produce per population. We also did the same thing with tourism budgets, so we collected a little bit of tourism budget data. This was a little harder to collect on a year-by-year basis, so we kind of fudged a little bit. But you can see interesting things here, like California and Nevada do really well as far as producing reviews based on the budget they spend, but Hawaii does surprisingly poorly. So I'm not sure how directly related these things are, but it's an interesting relationship to look at. And the idea here, again, is that the source of this information is out there on the web, but it was very difficult to pull into before we had this data feed coming in. So kind of like how we've talked about with other topics here during the summit, once you actually have data become available, all of a sudden all these things become really easy. And we're not an analytics company, right? We just provide data, and so we're just like, okay, what's a simple thing we can answer, and boom, there it was. So that's the hotel example. So then let me pull up shoe pricing data. So I'll quickly show you the indecipherable shoe data without the plugin. Oh, I don't have my token, never mind. That's strange. Okay, well, okay, I won't show you that. But I can show you interesting visualization on shoe data. Okay, so here what we did is we pulled out, I think it was about 25,000 different shoes. I think there are probably multiple prices per shoe. And then we took the average of every shoe brand, and then we also manually divided them between luxury and non-luxury shoes. So what you can see there, there's a dashed line that runs down the side. That's the average price of non-luxury shoes. And then each of these are luxury shoe brands. So actually my wife was the main consultant on who determined luxury versus non-luxury. So we've got like Tory Burch at the top, and at the bottom we've got Brunella Cucinelli, I guess. Anyway. Now here's the interesting thing. Again, we're not an analytics company, but we quickly saw some patterns in this data, again, because it's now available. So we actually saw there's kind of like a 3x3 pricing matrix or pricing strategy matrix that all these guys used. One is sort of a clustering around average prices, and another is a clustering around distribution of prices. So the average price, you'll kind of see there's a small group at the top that clusters around like a $300 range. There's a large group that clusters between like 600 to 800. And there's a group that clusters around 1,000 and up. So that's one dimension. And then what we found was there was essentially 3 pricing distributions. There's an other category, but there's very few of those. So there's guys who have sort of a normal distribution, right? So Tory Burch here, and being in a room full of folks that are very adept at math, these are not pure normal distributions, but approximate ones. Let's see, who else? Barney's of New York, a little more of a skewed one. But then we have something called what we call a premium anchor, which we kind of defined as a clustering of shoes that lies like, I think, 2 or more price buckets away from the mean. So that's like a price bucket is like a $100 range, basically. So let's pull up one of those guys. Prada. Oops. Click. All right, let me refresh this. Let's try again. Tory Burch. There we go. Okay, so you've got their main cluster around here, but then you see they've got a bunch of shoes out here as well. So like 6 shoes in the $800 range when their mean shoe is $700. I think Jimmy Choo does this as well, right? And then we've got another group that does a double dip strategy. It's basically 2 overlapping normal distributions that are kind of separated. So let me pull out one of those guys, Giorgio Armani. Now this guy has, oh, why is it doing that? That's weird. Try again. No, there we go. So Givenchy has a bunch of shoes in this sort of $800 range, I guess, and then a bunch of shoes in this $15 range. So, and they all kind of use this 3x3 pricing strategy. So again, not being in the shoe business, not even really being in the analytics business, we pulled out this data really quickly because it's now available. And this is across, I think, dozens of retail websites. So that was really cool. So unfortunately, I don't have an example for the crowd sharing data yet because we just launched that kind of data. But I'm sure there'll be all sorts of interesting opportunities there with, because that'll include crowd sharing data, like rentals, and also property as well. So we're interested to see what kind of analysis can be pulled out of that. So the idea that I'd like to sort of expound upon is that we've talked a lot about how interesting analysis becomes available once the data becomes accessible. And a lot of folks here have talked about, well, the hardest part is just getting the data in the first place, or the problem we run into the most is the data is just not available. And this problem is very much true when it comes to companies trying to access information on the web. It just hasn't really been thought about that much because things like Google has made it so easy to get that information as a person. But a business wants to do that at scale. And now that it's becoming accessible, we're really interested to see what kind of applications get built on top of our data and anyone else who is providing this. So just the idea that what happens when your business knows everything the web knows, that's a huge influx of information and potential insight. We think a lot of interesting applications analysis will be done once that becomes available. So that's the general idea I want to leave you with, and hopefully you guys can think of some things with that. Thanks.